Welcome, everybody, to today's Paige. I'm your host, Paige Kornblue, and today we're talking politics. Hotspot issues, never a dull moment throughout the country, never a dull moment in Washington, and never a dull moment here on today's Paige. I want to break it down for you, for those of you who are in the know, and more importantly, for those who are not in the know, but really want to be, and it's okay. I want to let you in on a little secret. A lot of journalists often need clarification. We often need explanations. There's so much out there, especially what's happening in and out of Washington and in and out of our local governments and big governments. So I wanted to bring on my friend, my former colleague from WMUR News Channel 9. That's the ABC station up in New England, in New Hampshire, first in the nation in the primaries, political hotspot. We've got Scott Spradling with us.
Hi, Paige. Good to see you again, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Great to see you. You know, Scott's, in my opinion, one of our nation's top political analysts. He breaks it all down beautifully. Now runs the Scott Spradling Group. Say that 5 times fast.
Or maybe don't.
Or don't. Scott, let's start with the state of the nation. In your opinion, what are your general thoughts?
We're a nation divided right now, and I think we've been divided for a number of years for a number of different reasons. I think anybody who is tuning into this and thinking through sort of how do I feel as we get into 2022, I think we're all sort of feeling like we're stuck in molasses with this COVID pandemic that persists. We're all feeling like we should have been past it by now, and yet here we still are. And so that is driving what I would say would be a lot of frustration around our political landscape, because COVID is having impacts on how we do everything in our lives, especially in business. So we're seeing the impacts of this pandemic on our economy with things like higher prices and inflation, all of which is driving the voter psyche from coast to coast to a frenzied, frustrated type of level. So what does that mean nationally? You take that and aim it towards the polls, and what you get are American voters from Florida to New Hampshire and all the way out to California who are just not very happy with their lives and the status quo right now. And what that means in polls for President Biden is his approval ratings are not very good right now. Most national polls show that people are frustrated with their lives, not thinking the country's going in the right direction, and therefore the guy who's in charge gets some of the blame for that. Whoever is president when people are not happy or during difficult times usually shoulders the blame. So where we are at right now is a country divided sharply between Republicans and Democrats, and everyone seemingly frustrated with our status quo.
How does that improve? I mean, I feel like it's like a never-ending cycle, right? I mean, it's unfortunately been our recent history. Is that just what we need to get used to?
Hopefully not. And you ask a really good question, Paige, because I think how does it end can be applied to a number of different things. So how does it end with the pandemic and COVID? I think medical science is helping. We've got to deal with new policies and possible new restrictions. We may have to deal with a new cycle of life for a few years where January and February are not great months to gather, and that the family holiday times that we use for tradition are not necessarily a great idea with big numbers. So there's the vaccine debate that's ongoing. I'm not even going to get into that. But when you're talking about ending the pandemic, medical technology and human behavior are going to have to combine together in order for us to get past it. So that's one. Politically speaking, what we are seeing right now is the limitation of what our political leadership can actually do to affect and impact our day-to-day lives. If you're Joe Biden and you want to be reelected in 2024, the one thing you really want to have happen in 2022 is some good news for the economy, some great news for ending the pandemic, and your agenda of other things that you want to be doing, like infrastructure investments, passes Congress. If you're Joe Biden, that's how you become more popular, and that's how you maybe right the ship in terms of people's dissatisfaction with what's going on.
So how do you do that? We have the election year. It's the midterms. Are you hearing that feedback? Or is that just me?
Just you.
Okay. Election year, midterms. How do we look for this year, and what can we expect?
Yeah, so another good question, Paige. Right now, typically what happens with midterm elections, and that's the halfway point between a presidential term, typically the party out of power from the White House is the party that historically does better in the midterms. Now, if you live in New Hampshire or in Florida, I think technically it is more consistent. Historically, in Florida and New Hampshire, Republicans do better in the midterms, no matter who is in the White House, unless there are some major challenges, kind of like what we see. So the bottom line right now in 2022 is that Republicans have a lot of momentum because of American dissatisfaction with current leadership. So there is a sense that Republicans, by the end of this calendar year, will take over either the House or the Senate or both houses of Congress down in Washington, which, as we all know, would mean that the president and Republicans would have to work even more closely together and figure out compromise in order to get anything done. But that's the conventional wisdom as we get into this calendar year and start looking towards November.
You mentioned New Hampshire and Florida specifically, which we both know those states pretty well personally. A lot of where's the primary stand right now? And I imagine Florida's governor is a big player in some of that talk.
You are absolutely right. So Governor Ron DeSantis is obviously on a lot of lips up here in New Hampshire, seeing if by any chance he might dip his toe into the presidential election scene up here in the first in the nation primary. Believe it or not, we've already had visits from Republicans. In fact, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been here multiple times already, and it's only early 2022. So it's sort of like our national pastime up here in New Hampshire. Politics and presidential politics are a big deal, and it kind of happens constantly. But Governor Ron DeSantis is one that a lot of people are watching, that if former President Trump decides not to run in 2024, all of us basically up here expect DeSantis to jump in or at least flirt with it. So there's a little bit of betting going on about how soon we'll see the governor of Florida making a visit to the Granite State. I'm betting definitely before this year is over.
When we heard President Biden speak, what was it, a week ago, his big speech, obviously he had mentioned former President Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on Trump's moves these days and path forward?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are watching from the sidelines to try to figure out what he wants to do. Are we going to see a rematch between Biden and Trump in 2024? That is the question that starts all the speculation about the former president and really about the Republican Party. What we expect to see from Donald Trump in 2022 is, I think he'll weigh in on a lot of races all around the country. He'll hold rallies. He'll go to different states where there's tough congressional battles. He wants to have his fingerprints all over Republican successes in November of this year, because it will not only show Republican Party momentum, but it'll show Donald Trump momentum. That's actually the type of stepping stone process that leads to him being in the best possible shape for running for a president again in 2024. Now, is he gonna? I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I don't know even how to predict that. But I think he'll play a very active role in the 2022 election cycle. And in fact, one of our congressional races way up here in New Hampshire is going to be quite a battle. So I expect to see the former president right back here in the Granite State sometime soon.
Let's go back. We talked about recent history, but American history, from what you know, and the path. Has our nation always had this back and forth? Has it always been, where it's something we get used to, or something we sit in for a little while and then we maybe perhaps pop back? When you see all the old videos, it seems like such good times, but we have to remember it wasn't always.
Right.
Right.
You're so right, Paige. It's so easy to look back on past years with the rose-colored glasses of yesteryear and say, gosh, it was just better back then. But history tells us that the tensions that we feel right now, the deep partisan divides between Republicans and Democrats that we feel right now, it's not unprecedented, but it's worse than it has been in a long time. Vietnam era politics were years of protest. The 60s was a very turbulent time, historically speaking, with assassinations, the loss of a president, and then Watergate within a decade of that exact moment of JFK's assassination. So you have very turbulent times and very partisan divides as a part of our history. And of course, the 1860s has the Civil War. I mentioned that because you asked that question at a time when the United States Justice Department is now bringing sedition charges against fellow Americans for what happened on Capitol Hill on January 6th. That to me is a very symbolic conversation about how deep our divides are. We've been here before. We've found our way through it before, but it requires both sides to lay down their arms of both rhetoric and violence and start working together collaboratively. I don't know when that's going to happen. If I could predict that, I would probably be in a different tax bracket, quite frankly. But the reality is we will get back there, but we have to figure out how. I think social media tends to be kindling to burn this fire. And I also think that our partisan divide has to have a different level of conversation. And we need to get back to our basic manners that our parents taught us many years ago about how to interact with one another. Because right now, Republicans think Democrats are the enemy and Democrats think Republicans are the enemy. And there seems to be this sort of forgotten reality that we're all Americans and that we're all in this together. It's too deeply personal, and somehow we have to reel that back in. I'm not sure how that'll happen, but in hot arguments, there's the old cliche, cooler heads will prevail. Hopefully that's what's going to happen around here sometime soon. But in this era, at this juncture in time, there's a lot of tension, and COVID isn't helping the situation because we're all frustrated with that.
Right. Yeah, and that's got to start with our leaders and trickle all the way down to us as voters. What can voters do? What can we do to get involved and perhaps encourage us that it does help, right? People think, I'm just going to watch from the sidelines, but no.
Sure. I think one of the things that people can do is to stay informed. And that, to me, as a reformed journalist, that means get your information from more than one news source and go to the news sources where you might not necessarily agree with the politics, but you can still pick up at least what is being said by people that you might not necessarily agree with, but who will probably have a decent point or two to make in the overall political conversation of America. I think that's one. I think secondly, there's that old saying by Tip O'Neill years and years ago, the former Speaker of the House, who says you're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. And I think we need to get back to that mantra of agreeing on the basic facts of an issue and then disagreeing on what it means and where we go with those facts. Right now, we're arguing over things that we shouldn't be arguing over, like how big was the crowd size to an inauguration and do vaccines work? There are simple fact-based conversations that can be had based on science and based on what we can see with our eyes and hear with our ears that we should get back to. If we can have some basic baseline agreement over even minor issues, that's a start. And then I think there needs to be a rededication on both sides of the political aisle to be nice to one another and to listen, not just talk.
What's your advice on obtaining that information for all of us, for busy people, for busy parents, for busy people who are working all day, or, your guidance on, we're no longer coming home after work, sitting watching the nightly news like so many of our generations before us would do, or reading the newspaper, sitting, no time for that. What's your advice and guidance for those busy folks out there who want to know just?
Yeah, I think my answer would be there's an app for that. I think what you can do is download the Associated Press, which is still recognized by both sides of the political aisle as a good, strong, objective, neutral news source. I would say download the app of your local news outlets, whether it's paper, radio, TV. Stay connected to the local news. And really, it's just a matter of taking a few minutes each day or a couple days and just jump into these apps. What are the headlines? What's going on? Do just a little bit of the homework on some of the major issues so that as you start hearing the arguments, whether it's around the water cooler or on your television screen, you're a little bit more informed and you know what's being said. It's a little bit of a time investment, but you want to stay tied to some local news and go to some of those places that are inarguably objective news sources. And listen, if you're addicted to Fox News, keep watching Fox News, that's fine. But every now and again, change the dial, see what other people are talking about. It's kind of common sense in a lot of ways, Paige, that you just want to make sure that you're not relying on one set of voices to give you all of your information. You don't do that in your business world. You certainly don't do that with family and friends. Why would you do that with news and current events?
I love it. And then Scott Spradling will fill in the blanks on today's page.
I'll do the
Right?
best I can. I'll try
I
to keep
love
up
it.
with you.
You're my go-to guy. Scott, thank you. Any other takeaway messages, something we might have forgotten that might be helpful as we head into this new year, and some additional politics in the mix?
No, I don't think so. I think most folks kind of have an idea of what they know and what they believe and what they need to do to stay connected. And my thought would be just simply stay optimistic. Don't give up, whether it's dealing with the pandemic or dealing with ugly politics. Don't give up, because it's when people walk away that we don't get to solutions. That's what really truly stalls the process. Staying engaged, maybe offering a little bit of benefit of the doubt to people that you don't necessarily agree with, and staying tuned in. That's really what you need to do.
All right. How can we connect with you, Scott, and the Scott Spradling Group?
So I am at spradlinggroup.com, and you can feel free to jump in and go to my website. You can easily leave me messages there, and then drop a line if you ever have any questions or want to know what's going on in the first in the nation primary from the sunny Florida perspective. There are a lot of us up here in the Granite State that love to spend some sunny days down in Florida. So there's a lot of overlap of people that we all know.
Love it. Hope to see you down here too, Scott.
Thank you. I would love to get down.
Thanks for joining, and we'll see you back here soon. For all of you, just follow me here on today's page. That's today's page, the podcast. Also on my website, that's paigekornblue.com. I always say Paige with an I, Kornblue with a K, and at Paige Kornblue on Instagram and all the socials. So hope to see you all there. For now, cheers.